In 1936, 59-year-old Edgar Cayce lay on a couch, staring at the pocket watch before him. Slowly, he closed his eyes, and in a dream, he uttered those terrifying words of prophecy. When Mount Etna in Italy and Mount Pelée in the Caribbean erupt simultaneously, the Earth's poles will shift by 16 to 20 degrees. Europe will undergo massive changes, Japan will fall silent forever, and the Himalayas will become an arc. This disaster will be enough to wipe out more than 95% of life on Earth. When that time comes, we will have only 90 days to escape. The legendary Atlantis will reappear, and the Earth will enter a new era. Now, both Mount Etna and Mount Pelée are well-known active volcanoes. Although seismic activities in these regions have been frequent in recent years, these two volcanoes are located on opposite ends of the Earth's volcanic seismic belts, separated by vast distances. The chances of them erupting simultaneously are quite slim. Cayce said that this event wouldn't be too far off, predicting it would occur around 1998. Now, if we look back, the predicted time has already passed by more than 20 years. Have we noticed any unusual events on Earth during this time? But in the days that followed, U.S. official agencies did detect slight shifts in the Earth's axis, and the time when this shift began in 1998. Could it be that these two volcanoes, standing like ends of a seesaw, will eventually erupt simultaneously as time goes on? Is the Earth heading towards a massive upheaval, with humanity facing an ultimate doomsday challenge? Perhaps all of this may come to pass. But before disaster strikes, let's first learn about Edgar Cayce. Who exactly was he? Edgar Cayce was an American prophet, often referred to as the Sleeping Prophet. This title came about because all of Cayce's over 14,000 predictions were made while he was asleep, spoken as if they were mere dream talk. His childhood was much like that of most others at the time. He was born in a poor rural area of Hopkinsville during a period of active Christian revival. The strong religious atmosphere deeply influenced Cayce's entire life. While other kids were playing outside, Cayce preferred to take a Bible into the woods and read. He described his childhood by saying that his diligent study of the Bible eventually led him to experience a miracle. At the age of 11, while reading the Bible as usual, a bright light suddenly appeared before him. In the light, a figure of a winged woman faintly emerged. She asked Cayce, "What is the one thing you wish to do most in your life?" Scratching his head, Cayce responded, "I want to help others, especially sick children." Of course, no one at the time could have imagined what form his dream would eventually take, but from that day on, strange things began to happen. Cayce would frequently see his grandfather, who had long passed away. His grandfather spoke to Cayce about many things, including the Civil War. Cayce also learned about Egypt, Persia, and many other things, details even his parents didn't fully understand. Most of the time, however, his parents simply dismissed these as a child's imagination. Later on, Cayce's father received a letter from the school. The teacher accused Cayce of never paying attention in class. Furious, his father returned home and decided to test Cayce's spelling himself. Cayce was terrified, gripping the pen nervously because he didn't know much at all. His father, utterly disappointed, pushed Cayce off the chair in anger. As Cayce fell to the floor, he once again heard the voice of the woman. She told him to stand up and lie down on his textbook for a while. Feeling dejected, Cayce wiped away his tears and returned to the table. He rested his head on the textbook and fell asleep. When Cayce woke up, he was astonished to find that the contents of the book had imprinted in his mind like images. Whether he knew them before or not, he could now recite them fluently. He could hardly believe it. He brought more textbooks and lay down on them, and every time it worked flawlessly. And so Cayce spent the rest of that semester learning in his dreams, quickly rising from a struggling student to the best in school. Unfortunately, this ability only carried him through to the 9th grade, after which he had to drop out due to his family's financial difficulties. After leaving school, Cayce spent most of his time looking for work. He first spent 4 years as a clerk in a bookstore, and later he joined his father in selling insurance. Suddenly, a severe cold led to a serious case of laryngitis for Cayce, causing paralysis of his vocal cords and leaving him unable to speak. He sought medical help far and wide, But no one could find a cure. Weeks turned into months, and he had to take on a job as a photographer's assistant, a position that didn't require him to speak. The following year, using his meager savings, he opened a photography studio. By 1901, a hypnotist named Hart was performing at the Opera House in Hopkinsville. Upon hearing about Cayce's strange illness, Hart offered to treat him with hypnosis for a fee of $200. Hypnosis was very popular in America at that time, so Cayce, desperate for a cure, agreed. On the day of the performance, the Opera House was packed with people eager to see whether Hart could indeed cure the young man through hypnosis. As the performance began, Cayce lay on a bed, and as Hart swung a pocket watch back and forth in front of him, Cayce quickly fell into a hypnotic state. Then something miraculous happened. Cayce, who had been mute for so long, suddenly began to speak. The excited audience quickly urged Hart to wake Cayce, eager to hear his thoughts. But sadly, upon waking, Cayce reverted to his mute state. This strange occurrence eventually reached the ears of Dr. Al Lane, an amateur physician in New York who had studied hypnosis and osteopathy. Sensing a golden opportunity to make a name for himself, Lane offered to treat Cayce using hypnosis. However, unlike the previous session, this time, Lane wanted Cayce to suggest his own treatment while under hypnosis. On the day of the session, Cayce, in a trance, stated that his condition was caused by psychological factors and that Lane needed to guide him in increasing the blood circulation to his throat. 20 minutes later, Cayce's throat began to turn red, and suddenly he woke up and coughed up a large amount of blood. Just like that, after a year of being mute, Cayce finally regained his voice. Dr. Lane, who had hypnotized Cayce, was utterly astonished. He believed that Cayce's unique ability was a divine gift and urged him to use it to heal others. Cayce, too, felt that the gift bestowed upon him by God should be shared with the world. Thus, the two men agreed to work together, and Cayce began his journey of using hypnosis to diagnose and heal. The method was simple, yet it seemed otherworldly. First, Cayce would lie on a bed with his hands crossed over his stomach. Under hypnosis, guided by the hypnotist, he would enter a semi-conscious state. Cayce only needed a letter from the client to establish a connection and read their condition. Though the way he accessed information varied each time, one thing was consistent. After waking up, Cayce was unaware of what he said under hypnosis, but he often wondered if this ability was the fulfillment of the wish he had made as a child to that winged woman. To honor that promise, Cayce never charged a single penny for his hypnotic readings. At this point, many people might think Cayce was just a charlatan with a rudimentary knowledge of trickery. However, to everyone's surprise, Cayce's extraordinary abilities gained significant attention, and within 10 years, he was featured in the New York Times. His name became almost universally known, and he was recognized as one of the greatest prophets of the 20th century. Prominent figures such as the 28th President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, the leading innovator Thomas Edison, and the Hollywood goddess Marilyn Monroe were all clients of Cayce. Of course, Cayce's fame didn't only stem from his ability to heal through hypnosis, but also from the astonishing accuracy and breadth of his predictions. 6 months before the 1929 stock market crash, Cayce warned his friends who were involved in the stock market to sell their shares immediately. At that time, the American economy was thriving, and everything seemed to be flourishing. Many people dismissed his predictions, believing them to be nonsense. However, by 1931, when the Great Depression had reached its worst, the stock market had plummeted across the board. Those who had ignored Cayce's advice could only regret it deeply. Cayce consoled them by saying that the tough times wouldn't last long and that the U.S. economy would fully recover by 1933. And sure enough, in 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal pulled the United States out of the Great Depression. Subsequently, Cayce made precise predictions about the world order, even as events seemed to indicate a period of unparalleled peace. Since 1920, various countries joined the League of Nations, which at its peak had 58 member states. However, Cayce stood up and predicted that Austria, Germany, and Japan would form an alliance, and unless a divine force intervened, the entire world would be plunged into war. He made this statement in 1935, and this alliance wasn't revealed until the signing of the Tripartite Pact on September 27, 1940. Not only did he predict the outbreak of World War II in advance, But he also accurately described details such as Hitler's rise to power and the US's involvement in the war, which is chilling to consider. Beyond his predictions in politics and economics, Cayce also spoke about ancient myths, particularly Atlantis. At this point, we must mention one of Cayce's most shocking prophecies, the one we started with, the shifting of the Earth's axis. He predicted that the Earth would face a catastrophe that would reshape continents and redraw the world's borders. Places that were once cold or subtropical would become much hotter, and giant ferns and coniferous plants would grow wildly. These dramatic changes, according to Cayce, would begin sometime between 1958 and 1998. In reality, scientists have indeed observed a phenomenon known as the accelerated polar drift. The journal Nature announced that in the mid-1990s, the movement of the magnetic field was increasing at a rate of about 15 kilometers per year, up to about 55 kilometers per year. Although there are many differences between the Earth's magnetic field and the axial tilt, the U.S. National NOAA caused alarm because the year when the magnetic field and accelerated drift began was precisely 1998. If events unfolded as Cayce predicted, the world would look vastly different. First, the African continent would see the Nile River widen, and Egypt, Israel, and the entire eastern Mediterranean coast would be completely submerged in the sea. The following week would usher in a period of high seismic activity. Violent collisions between tectonic plates would cause the Japanese archipelago to sink, leaving only a few islets. China's coastline would also retreat inland by several hundred miles, forcing people to seek refuge in higher terrain. At that time, the Himalayas, Hingduan Mountains, Tian Shan Mountains, Pamir Plateau, and Tibetan Plateau would become arcs of refuge. Some parts of Russia and California would become highly fertile land, while some areas of North America, including Canada, would be submerged. Greenland would expand and ultimately become one of the safest places in the New World. To the west of Africa, in the Atlantic Ocean, the legendary continent of Atlantis would reappear. This reappearance of Atlantis is the second of Cayce's chilling prophecies. Not only did Cayce believe that Atlantis was real, but he also predicted that the city would be rediscovered near Bimini Island in 1968 or 1969. Coincidentally, 30 years after Cayce made this statement, in 1968, underwater archaeologist Valentine accidentally discovered a submerged rock formation near the coast of Bimini Island. Located 6 meters below sea level, this formation, known as the Bimini Road, consists of a pathway made of square-shaped megalithic stones. Although we still cannot assess its history and origin, such a discovery, combined with Cayce's highly accurate predictions, has led many to believe that the entrance to Atlantis may be right there. Many people have wondered, "Cayce, how do you know so much?" Cayce replied that he did not believe he possessed divine power, but that he could visit the Akashic records in his dreams. What are the Akashic records? This is the third of Cayce's chilling prophecies, a virtual book that records the collective subconscious of all humanity. These records contain every thought, action, word, feeling, and intention. By extracting important information from them, Cayce could glimpse the future and offer help to his patients. Therefore, the Akashic records are also called the Book of Life or God's Book of Remembrance. Cayce said that the Akashic records are not far from anyone, and that, by letting go of personal attachment to self-interest, anyone could acquire this skill. On New Year's Day, January 1st, 1945, Cayce made his final prediction. He calmly stated that he would be buried in 4 days. At that time, there was nothing wrong with his health, but on the third day, he suffered a stroke, leading to a brain hemorrhage. He passed away on the fourth day at the age of 67. Cayce's life was truly legendary. He interpreted 14,306 cases of prophecies and left detailed records. These records have been compiled into hundreds of books and are preserved at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach. His interpretations have attracted the attention of many scholars and media outlets who have studied and reported on them extensively. However, there are also many voices of opposition, with some even describing Cayce as a performing charlatan. Critics point out that Cayce often used vague expressions like maybe, which is a common technique used by commercial leaders. In psychology, this is known as the Barnum effect, where people are willing to accept overly generalized and non-specific personality descriptions, believing they accurately capture their unique traits. Moreover, in many cases, by the time Cayce received letters from patients, the patients had already passed away. This left room for much speculation, but regardless of the skepticism, Cayce provided comfort to those who had lost loved ones and hope to the unfortunate. Throughout his life, Cayce performed 14,306 psychic readings, over 9,000 of which were for healing others. Some of these people never met him, and he never charged a single penny. Whether he was a true psychic or merely delusional, he was helping others in his own way. Lastly, let's talk about Cayce's interpretations of dreams. He believed that events in people's lives are often foreshadowed in their dreams. Cayce's views on dream interpretation can be summarized as follows. 1. Everyone is their best dream interpreter. 2. Sleep allows a person to set aside their conscious mind and enter a subconscious state connected to the soul. Most dreams come from this subconscious state. 3. There is no question that dreams cannot answer. 4. Significant events in a person's life are often hinted at in dreams. 5. The more you pay attention to and act on the insights from dreams, the stronger your ability to interpret them becomes. 6. Food can influence your dreams. 7. Dreams are greatly beneficial to the growth of your soul. All right, that's all for this video. See you next time.